Hello everyone and welcome to this video in which we'll talk about Intel versus AMD in Arma 3. There's a lot of talk obviously around, and I had the privilege to be testing two rigs that are identical except for the motherboard and the CPU. So the motherboard for the AMD was an Asus X470F gaming with the 3700X processor, and the Intel version has a Gigabyte Z390 Aorus Master with a CPU that is an i7-9700K. The rest is exactly the same, and we'll see the specs afterwards when I have the graph that I made there. So both platforms perform incredibly well, and we'll see some results at stock, and we'll see some results when I overclocked the two, because you can overclock in a computer usually mostly CPU, RAM, being memory, and graphics card. So I didn't change anything in the graphics card, I just wanted to see how the platform was performing and what the boundaries were. So on the AMD platform I took the CPU, kept it completely stock, and just overclocked the memory settings. And I was able to actually go quite far, and they made a lot of improvement. So on the Intel, on the other hand, I didn't touch the RAM and I only overclocked the CPU. Now, a lot of people might say, why didn't you overclock both? All right, here's the answer. So on the AMD, I did not overclock the CPU because in my opinion, and from what I've read from reputable sources, there is actually no benefit in overclocking the CPU. So the Precision Boost and Precision Boost Overdrive do a hell of a job in, handling anything that's being thrown at them. So I didn't touch the CPU. On the other hand, on the Intel platform, I could overclock the memory, and trust me, I did try, but I didn't get any real benefit versus the stability of the system. I'm not that good of an overclocker, so a lot of the times things were not reliable. And so what I did was I took the CPU and I only overclocked that. It's actually, though, what I think is actually pretty fair that we took one aspect and one aspect only of the platform and took it up. So we'll be able to see how both behaved at stock and how both behaved when pushed to the element that is best for the platform. Now, I'm not saying that you won't be able to overclock an AMD processor, although I will find it unlikely from all the tests that I found, and you can read around that there's no real benefit. And I'm not saying that you cannot overclock memory on an Intel processor. You can. The benefits, however, from the CPU, in my opinion, are much more important than the ones from the RAM. And so you gotta do one first. And on the AMD, there's really no point in doing CPU, so I only did RAM first. And on the Intel, I would do CPU first and then following up with the RAM. But I am kind of pushing at 5 GHz at the end of the Intel rig, so there was not much point or much headroom for a noob like me to overclock the memory, because I either could not post, or if I could post with these two sticks, I actually couldn't get things to be stable. In single player, Arma would play, but when benchmarking it, it would crash. So, I'm still investigating why, but I don't want to, talk about that anymore. The graphics card has been the same drivers, same version, same everything. So we have exactly the same things going on. What is there to say? Let's take a look at what we have here in the graphs. All right, so first off, the AMD on RAM at XMP and CPU on auto did 66.8 FPS, and you can see the graph of how it did. The Intel did 69.9, so this is what, plus 5% more than the AMD on stock. This is everything on auto and everything on XMP profile. And when we moved to ultra settings, we have the AMD doing 43.1 FPS and the Intel doing 45.5. So again, it's a plus 4%. Now, why is there maybe no surprise in this? Well, Arma 3 is a game that relies a lot on single core performance because the engine is not too optimized and doesn't really like multi-core performance as much as it likes single core speed, single core, single thread speed. On ultra settings, there's a lot more data being moved around. So it's always useful to do ultra and low. That's what I think and what I found out. So in the end, when we pushed these two things to their maximum that I could get them, I got AMD versus Intel to be this definitive answer. Some people say there's no rig at the moment, 6 years after the release of Arma 3, that can push 60 FPS on ultra settings, but this rig could. And I haven't even messed with the RAM, you know, as I said. So the very final results are that the AMD Ryzen 3700X managed to get 53.8 FPS with a low of 38, high of 76, and the CPU was on auto plus the precision boost overdrive, but the RAM managed to get to 3733 CL14. It was like 14, 15, 16, 36, something like that. And the Intel i7 97K managed to get 61.7 FPS with a high of 110, low of 33. And the RAM was XMP profile, haven't overclocked anything, so it's kind of the opposite of what I did on the Ryzen, where the CPU was not overclocked. And the CPU on the Intel reached 5 GHz with the Ring or Cache or Encore at 4.8 GHz. That's quite a lot for me, and I'm happy at, you know, at how it went. The vCore, if you're interested in that, is around 1265, 1275. So it oscillates between 6.5 and 7.5, something like that. So it's not even that much, I would say. The base value, obviously, then, you know, it fluctuates. So here's the graph. We can see how in red the Ryzen did, and in blue how the Intel did. I took great care in scaling the two graphs so that this, you know, is an actual good representation of value. So 33 is where it should be, 110 is where it should be, and all the values 76, 62, 54 and 38 fall where they should. So you can see in real time how the two rigs behaved. The common specs that I haven't told you yet are that the RAM is a G-Skill Trident Z 3200 CL14, twice, you know, 2 sticks of 8 GB. The Asus is the graphics card is a 2070 Super Asus ROG NVIDIA. Deepcool Castle 360 RGB V2 as cooler is an AIO liquid cooling. Samsung Evo 854 system, and the SN754 the game. Thermaltake ring case fans, Fantex Evo Vex case, whatever, and Windows 10 Pro X 641009. So that's the common specifications for these two builds that I've made. And what can I say? Final thing is there's probably something that can be done with better memory, both on the Ryzen and both on the Intel. There's no overclocking that I've done on the i7. For memory, maybe I could squeeze some more FPS out of that, but the Intel wins. It has a sort of 15% more FPS, but the Ryzen has, for example, a higher low FPS, so it's got 5 FPS more in the low regime. So what would you say is, you know, what was my experience playing Arma 3? Well, both rigs are perfectly fine. Maybe in some areas, tiny urban areas, or, you know, thick AI, procedural, whatever missions, the Intel suffers less because you can't really tell when there's a transition between woodland or urban area. I play at 75 Hz with the G-Sync, so I'm not interested in pushing 110 FPS, and I don't see a lot of fluctuation, and I like the FPS to be stable at, you know, an amount that is playable and fun. Remember that we have been testing everything at 1440p, not 1080. So we're talking 2K resolution for this. Obviously, if you drop the resolution, you're gonna get better FPS. That goes without saying. But these are over 60 FPS on Intel on a 2K resolution display. Alright, so that covers it. I hope this was interesting to you. I'm sure some people will be able to do better than what I've done. This was done very fast from somebody who has no idea how to overclock stuff. He just read some useful guides of the internet and, you know, put himself into action. So there you have it. This is the final word on AMD versus Intel at the moment between these two rigs for Arma 3. Have fun. See you on the field.